When I was 20, I got my first big salary and immediately spent it all on expensive equipment and clothes, thinking that it would make me happy. If I could go back, I would invest at least some of that money in education or savings. Today, I understand that investing in yourself is the most valuable. I signed up for a credit card with big rewards, thinking I could easily pay it back. In reality, I was deep in debt due to high interest rates and minimum payments. If I could change anything, I would never take out loans for impulse purchases. In 2021, I invested all my savings in cryptocurrency when it was at its peak. A month later, the market crashed and I lost almost everything. Now I understand that you should never put all your eggs in one basket, especially in such risky assets. I bought shares in a company only because a colleague said it was the future. I didn't check the reports or the analytics. The company went bankrupt a year later. If I could go back, I would have learned the basics of investing before making such decisions. I took out a loan to buy an expensive car to impress people. 3 years later, I was broke, in debt, and with a car that no one noticed. Today, I drive an inexpensive but reliable car, and I wish I had done it sooner. When I first started earning, it seemed like the money would never run out. I spent it all on parties, expensive restaurants, and fancy clothes. Now I'm 30, and I regret not saving then. If I could go back in time, the first thing I'd do would be to make a budget and open a savings account. I once bought a flat to rent out, but I didn't check the market. The house was in an area where almost no one rented, and the utilities were eating up all my income. If I could change anything, I would have thoroughly studied the real estate market and sought advice from specialists. I never thought about unexpected expenses until my car broke down. I had no savings and had to take out a loan. If I could go back, I would start putting at least 10% of my salary aside for a rainy day. My wife and I had a lavish wedding, spending more than we could afford. We took out loans, thinking, this is the only time in my life. Now that we're paying off our debts, we realize that happiness doesn't depend on expensive decorations. If we could go back, we'd do it much more modestly. I signed up for a bunch of online services that offered first month free. I forgot about them, and they kept charging my card for years. I'm more careful about my subscriptions now, but if I could change anything, I'd cancel them after the first month. Inspired by the success of others, I invested all my money in stocks, knowing nothing about them. 6 months later, they were worthless, and I was left with nothing. Now I understand that knowledge and patience are important in investing, and I regret that I was so impulsive. I took out a large loan to attend a private university, thinking it would guarantee me a high-paying job, but the market turned out to be oversaturated with specialists, and I am still paying off that loan. If I could go back, I would choose a more affordable education or consider free courses. I spent almost all my bonus on the latest gadget that was in fashion for a couple of months. Now it's gathering dust because technology becomes obsolete quickly. If I could change the past, I would invest that money in something useful, like a trip or a course. I invested in a friend's startup that seemed like a brilliant idea, but I didn't even look at the business plan. The company closed a year later, and I lost the money. Now I understand that friendship and business are different things, and you should always study where you invest your money. I once borrowed money to go on a luxury vacation, thinking it would be memories for a lifetime. But when I got home, all I could think about was how to pay it back. If I could change one thing, I would plan a more budget-friendly trip without the financial stress. I once bought a car that was way too expensive for my budget just because it looked cool. I ended up spending half my salary on payments and maintenance. Now, I drive a simpler car and realize that looks are not everything. If I could go back, I would rather invest that money in a house or savings. I moved to another city for my dream job without calculating all the expenses. Rent and living there turned out to be much more expensive than I expected. A year later, I returned home with no savings. Now, I always calculate a budget and check the real prospects before making such decisions. I bought an expensive watch, thinking it was an investment in status. A few years passed, and I realized that no one really paid attention to them, and their price on the secondary market dropped significantly. Now, I think it would be better to invest this money in myself or my development. We spent a fortune on a big wedding to keep everyone happy. In the end, the guests forgot about it after a couple of weeks, and we were left with debt. If we could go back, we would have had a small celebration for our closest friends. I spent thousands of dollars on a collection of rare video games in the heat of the moment, thinking they would be valuable. After a few years, I realized that most of them were just gathering dust on a shelf. Now, I only buy games that I actually intend to play. I bought a ton of designer clothes because I have to look stylish. Some of the pieces I only wore a few times and then went out of style. If I could go back, I would invest that money in something more practical or long-lasting. At some point, I got into gambling, thinking I could make money quickly. The result? I lost much more than I won. Now I understand that it is better to slowly but steadily accumulate money than to rely on luck. I bought professional photography equipment, deciding that I would become a photographer. A year later, I realized that photography is not my thing, and the equipment is lying around idle. If I could change anything, I would first try budget options to see if this hobby is right for me. I bought a dacha, thinking I would spend every week there. In reality, I had neither the time nor the money to take care of the house. If I could go back, I would have bought something more practical or invested the money in traveling. I got an exotic pet without thinking about how much time and money it would take to care for it. After a few months, I realized I couldn't cope and had to give it to good hands. Now, I always plan my resources before taking on such a responsibility. When I was young, I had the opportunity to move to a big city and start a career in a promising company, but I decided to stay in my hometown because I was afraid of change. Now I realize that I passed up a chance that could have changed my life. Instead, I am stuck in a low-paying job, and now it is too late to change anything. If I could go back, I would take a risk for my dream. When I got my first credit card, I felt rich. I bought new gadgets, clothes, paid for dinners for friends, and then I got my first bill. The payments were huge, and the interest rates were mounting. I spent years paying off debts that I could have avoided if I had used my head. Today, my advice to everyone is, don't use a credit card if you can't pay it off at the end of the month. I invested in a friend's promising startup, thinking it was a brilliant idea. But a year later, the company went bankrupt, and I lost all my savings. If I could go back, I would have done more research into the business before handing over my money. Now, I don't invest without careful analysis and expert advice. I once took out a loan to buy a luxury vacation because I thought, you only get one life. The week on the beach was amazing, but coming home in debt was a nightmare. If I could change the past, I would plan a more budget-friendly vacation so I could enjoy it without the financial stress. I thought I could make money flipping houses like they do on TV. I bought an old house, spent all my money on fixing it up, but couldn't sell it. It was in a neighborhood where few people wanted to live. If I could go back, I would have researched the market first instead of relying on TV shows. In my 20s, I spent almost my entire salary on parties and fancy clothes. I wanted to live life to the fullest, but now I realize that I was wasting money. If I could change anything, I would start saving at least part of my income. Today, I have to start from scratch, and it's much harder than I thought. When my wife and I bought our house, I insisted on an expensive kitchen with premium appliances, thinking it was an investment in our comfort. Today, we hardly cook at home, and the appliances are still being paid off. If I could go back, I would choose something more modest and invest the difference in long-term assets. I got into a prestigious university, even though I knew I couldn't afford it. I took out a huge student loan and ended up not finding a job in my field. Now, I'm still paying for an education that didn't do me any good. If I could go back, I would have chosen an affordable college or technical school. I bought a new sports car without thinking about the cost of maintenance. After 6 months, I realized that I was spending half my salary on gas, insurance, and repairs. I had to sell the car at a loss. If I could go back, I would buy something simple and reliable. I signed up for dozens of first-month free services but forgot to cancel them. Over the course of a year, my card was charged hundreds of dollars for services I never even used. I now keep a close eye on my subscriptions, but if I could go back, I would never have started this practice.